So how to write your final research paper? So basics. The length of the complete paper will be 2000 to 2500 words, excluding the cover page. So you might remember when we were discussing the controversy analysis paper, I told you that you will have a separate title page or cover page with your name, name of the course, and name of the professor or name of the instructor on it. So the length of 2500 words excludes the cover page, works cited, and annotated bibliography. And the format should be double space. The line spacing is double, 12 times New Roman, and you will use APA author date format. Actually, it is the same format you use for your controversy analysis paper. Now, for works cited and annotated bibliography, so works cited are actually references, all right? And annotated bibliography, that could be the same bibliography, that could be the same annotated bibliography you have already submitted to me. But if you make any changes in the list of resources that you used for your final paper, you should reflect that change in the bibliography that you submit with the final paper. So for example, if you add another resource for your final paper, you should add that in the bibliography as well. If you don't make any change and if you don't use any extra resource, you can just submit the same annotated bibliography that you worked on. Okay, so what exactly you are going to do in the final research paper, which is due on 21st of February. You are supposed to analyze the controversy. Now, which controversy? The controversy about which you already have written your controversy analysis paper. Now, this is the part actually you have already done. Okay, so the analysis is already there. You have done this part. What are you going to add to that? You are going to add your argument to it in comparison with other arguments. So what you have already done, it will remain there. But you will add, now you will add your argument in comparison with other arguments. So that means there are two components of what you still need to do. Number one, you still need to introduce your argument with reference to the controversy that you analyzed in your controversy analysis paper. At that stage, you are not given an opportunity to state your own argument with reference to that controversy. At that stage, previously, you were asked to just analyze the controversy and write others' arguments as they were. But now you are being asked to take a position with reference to that controversy. When you take a position, basically you introduce your own argument. So what do you think about the controversy which you already have analyzed? When you state your argument for your final paper, it is not enough to just state your argument. Rather, you are supposed to state your argument in comparison with the arguments of other writers. Now, you have your own argument, but what is it that other writers say about the same controversy? you are supposed to mention that too. And while you mention their arguments, you should argue how your argument is more authentic as compared to their argument. So basically, refute, you are supposed to refute the arguments of other writers in order to validate your own argument. Now, where the arguments of other writers will come from? The arguments of other writers will come from the readings that you are doing at this stage. And the readings are the ones which are already mentioned in your annotated bibliography. You can pick any 5 relevant readings from your annotated bibliography to be used in the final part of your final research paper, in the argument part of your final research paper. You can choose at least one argument from each reading to analyze further and to refute further. So if you choose one argument from each reading, you will have 5 arguments to contend. You will have 5 arguments to refute. You will have 5 arguments to talk about. Okay? Or in other words, you might have 5 paragraphs in your argument part of the paper. Now, it is going to be a little tricky because you do not know beforehand what kind of research it is going to be. Give me a minute, please. Okay, sorry. So, if you have 5 articles you are reading from, you can choose one argument from each article and refute that argument. Okay, so uh, basically this exercise of refuting the arguments, it is something that you people have done in WRCM 101. Okay, so you might remember from there that there are certain ways for us to identify weaknesses in the arguments of other writers. So there is a method, it's called the Tolman method, to analyze the arguments of other writers, in which you point out that why the argument of other writers is not strong enough. So you might say, for example, that the argument of the other writer does not have sufficient evidence, or the evidence that has been provided by the other writer is not verifiable, or it is not authentic. Or you might also say that the claim that the other writer has, that claim is not verifiable. Okay, so these are a few words that we use in order to point out the weakness or insufficiency of the argument of the other writer. So either there is no evidence, or the evidence is not verifiable, or it is not authentic, or the claim, you might say the claim is not clear, or the claim is not authentic, something of that kind. Okay, so you point out the weakness in the argument of the other writer, and you propose your own argument at the place of that argument. Now, what will be the overall organization of your paper? The overall organization of your paper will be like this. On the top, you will have a thesis. Previously, the controversy analysis paper that you wrote, you are supposed to have a thesis statement over there as well. But you might remember that I said at that time over and over again that your thesis statement will just be a statement in the controversy analysis paper which only states the objective of your research. So you might say, for example, that in this paper, I will be studying the origin of coronavirus, or in this paper, I will be studying whether coronavirus is natural or man-made. Okay, but you are not supposed to take a position. However, now when you are going to write your final paper, your thesis will change a little bit, because you have read quite a number of resources. You have sufficient information about the topic. You have already analyzed the arguments. So based upon all that information that you have by this time, now you are qualified enough to make a reasonable statement and to take a reasonable position with reference to that topic. Therefore, now your thesis should begin with a clear position that you are taking with reference to your controversy. So begin by stating what is your position with reference to that particular topic. So you might begin your paper by saying that in this paper, I will argue that coronavirus is man-made. And then after the thesis, right in the beginning, in the first paragraph, you should also preview the main points of your paper. So for example, you might say that first I will be introducing the history and status quo of the controversy that surrounds this issue. right? And then I will be pointing out the causes of this controversy, and I will also propose what are the solutions. Or in some cases, you might not have a cause or solution. You might simply have uh, the problem, and then uh, you you only might have the arguments to clarify your position, to support your position. So you might say that you will be stating the arguments of the other writers, and then you will provide counter arguments. So let me actually write it over here: arguments and counter arguments. Okay, so in some cases, your topic might be like that it might have a problem, and that problem might have some causes, and the causes would have some solutions. Okay, for example, you might be interested in studying the causes responsible for low human rights index in Pakistan. Okay, so you might like to identify its causes, and then you might like to propose the solutions. However, in some other cases, for example, the origin of coronavirus, you might not have any causes as such, but you will have the arguments. So what are the arguments of the other writers who say that coronavirus is in fact natural? What is their arguments? And now what counter argument you are proposing or offering? Because you say that coronavirus is not natural, but it is man-made, right? So in the preview of main points, you should just mention or predict or state what is going to follow in the rest of the paper. And then state the problem or controversy. This is the part of the paper you already have done. Problem and controversy. So you will mention its history, you will mention its status quo. And then you will move on to the arguments and counter arguments. Over here, you will state what one group of opponents might say. Then state your opposing position. Support your position with credible research, testimony, and evidence. And finally, explain why your position is stronger than your opposition's position. And that will be okay. Now let me just say one thing more over here. It is the conclusion. You should also state a conclusion at the end. Now this conclusion is going to be a little different from the conclusion you already wrote. In this conclusion, you are going to re-emphasize your thesis statement and some of the arguments you have given above. Students, your questions now.